Hello and welcome to this thought for the day. Recently, the weekday lectionary threw up one of those gospel readings preaches fear. It was a parable from Luke chapter 16, often known as the parable of the unjust steward. It seems difficult because it appears that Jesus is praising a manager's dishonest use of his master's money. I think it's a great story. At its heart, I think, is the notion that all that we have, all that we desire to have, pales into insignificance compared to the importance of our relationship with God. The character of the unjust steward is someone well versed in manipulating the business of his master for his own ends. He comes unstuck when he is found out. Immediately he goes into damage control. He isn't interested in making amends or asking for mercy. He's only interested in the alternatives that benefit him. Physical labour is beyond him and begging is below him. His solution is ingenious, but for it to work, he must give up some of the gains he had been expecting. It's a bit like the story of the child who puts his hand into the cookie jar and grasps tightly onto one of the cookies. Then he tries to pull his hand out, but having made a fist around the cookie, it won't fit through the top of the jar. The only way he can get his hand out is to let go of that cookie. At first, he won't let go, not for anything. But sooner or later, reality sets in and the child must let it go. In the same way, the steward has to reassess his priorities in the light of his crisis. He calls in his master's creditors and gets them to mark down their debts. "How much do you owe?" he says to one client. 100 measures of oil. He tells him to write it down to 50. To the next, who owes 100 measures of wheat, he tells to write down 80. He may well have been writing down his own cut from the transaction. Some of this might have been a legitimate commission. So he is willing to let go of the cookie in order to get his hand out of the jar. He may well also have claimed to act on behalf of his master. The result would have been that the debtors would have seen the master as extremely generous. The master could hardly sack the steward for being generous, even if he was being generous with the master's money. The action may also have been an insurance policy, so that if he did get sacked, he would have had other options, including gaining employment from those for whom he gained the discounts. The story tells us that letting go of immediate gains can be advantageous later. Delayed gratification, it's sometimes called. Having challenged hearers with the need to let go of the things we grasp onto, Jesus invites us to grasp onto what is right and true and eternal. At the heart of our being able to let go is a fundamental trust that God sustains creation. This is different from saying that God provides for our needs, because there is an important step between these two stages. Human greed so often gets between God's sustenance and the meeting of individual needs. We know that people miss out. There have been various rationalizations of this predicament over the centuries. It used to be considered within the divine order of things that some would be rich and others poor. The third verse of the well-known hymn All Things Bright and Beautiful by Cecil Francis Alexander, first published in 1848, originally went like this: "The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate." This verse does not appear in the version published in an Australian hymn book in 1977. I hope because as a society and a church, we can no longer stomach the thought that it is God's will that some remain impoverished while others have more wealth than they know what to do with. I think it was John D. Rockefeller who was once asked how much money was enough. His response was, "Just a little more." How we get from the fact of the generous sustenance of God to the meeting of the needs of human beings, and indeed all creation, is an enormous challenge for us, and we have not reached an adequate or just method of doing this yet. Christian charity has not been able to achieve it. Utilitarian philosophies have not been able to achieve it, nor have any of the practical expressions of Marx's thought been able to do it. There are some things we can do. We can ask of our church and community leaders how we can best help those in immediate need. We can ask of our politicians how best we can structure things that wealth is more justly and compassionately distributed. We can ask of ourselves, by the light of a conscience informed by our Christian faith, what it is we are really grasping for and how much is really enough. May God continually bless you.